Welcome to Singapore, the city that wins every global ranking while quietly sending its own people to the financial gym without a trainer, a towel, or a mercy rule. GDP per capita looks heroic. The skyline looks like it eats other skylines for breakfast. And yet, many Singaporeans are staring at bank apps wondering how a world-class economy turned everyday life into a subscription service they never agreed to. Let's get the first illusion out of the way. Prosperity here is real. It's just unevenly distributed, aggressively financialized, and delivered with a polite smile. The official story says wages rise with productivity, housing is affordable via clever acronyms, and the market is merely doing market things. The lived story is simpler. Prices sprint, salaries jog, and the finish line keeps moving because it's tied to asset inflation. Start with housing, the national sport disguised as policy. Home ownership is framed as destiny, not choice. The pitch goes like this: work hard, save diligently, plug your future into a long mortgage, and call it stability. The fine print says you're not really buying shelter. You're buying exposure to a balance sheet where land scarcity, population targets, and capital inflows do most of the talking. When prices rise, it's wealth creation. When they rise faster than incomes, it's character building. Stocks tell a similar bedtime story for adults. The city advertises itself as a financial hub, and it delivers. Capital loves Singapore. Money arrives, stays liquid, and multiplies politely. The problem is that capital returns do not clock in at 9 a.m. or pay school fees. Asset owners cheer. Workers recalibrate expectations. The gap widens while everyone pretends it's a rounding error. Daily life completes the triangle: transport, food, childcare, healthcare, insurance. Each line item looks reasonable on its own, like a buffet where every dish is priced fairly. Add them up, and the bill lands with the confidence of a private banker. The coping strategy becomes optimization. Fewer meals out, smaller spaces, longer commutes, delayed milestones. This is not decadence, it's triage. Policy plays referee and sometimes striker. Cooling measures cool until they don't. Subsidies soften until they expire. Taxes nudge behavior while the market sprints ahead. The result is a city that works brilliantly for flows of money and less brilliantly for the people anchoring those flows with their time. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A place can be globally rich and locally tight at the same time. A nation can celebrate fiscal prudence while households feel financially fragile. None of this requires incompetence. It only requires incentives aligned to assets first and wages later. If this sounds familiar, it should. This channel exists to translate glossy narratives into plain numbers. We talk stocks, property, capital, cash flow, and the quiet math that decides who gets comfortable and who gets creative. If you value clear-eyed finance over press release optimism, hit like. If you want the next chapters that break down housing mechanics, wage reality, and the capital pipeline that reshapes daily life, subscribe. Chapter 2 will follow the money trail from policy to property and explain why affordability keeps losing the race. It's stop pretending and say it cleanly. In Singapore, housing is not primarily shelter. It is a policy-managed asset class with a doorbell. The state tells you this is stability. The market tells you this is yield. Your bank tells you this is leverage. Only your monthly payment tells you the truth. The miracle narrative goes like this: high home ownership, orderly urban planning, disciplined mortgages. Very civilized, very spreadsheet-friendly. The missing slide is what happens when housing prices structurally outpace wages for decades. Ownership stops being empowerment and becomes long-duration financial exposure disguised as adulthood. Let's talk mechanics, not feelings. First, land scarcity is not a bug. It's the core feature. When supply is finite and demand is actively managed upward through population targets, foreign capital friendliness, and aspirational messaging, prices do what prices always do. They climb. Slowly at first, then politely, then relentlessly. Second, public housing is not immune. HDB is marketed as affordability insurance. In practice, it is affordability on a timer. Entry looks manageable. Resale prices tell another story. Appreciation is celebrated as wealth creation until younger buyers realize they are funding earlier cohorts' retirement through higher entry prices. This is not intergenerational harmony. It is asset transfer with good branding. Third, financing fills the gap between income reality and asset fantasy. Long mortgages normalize high prices. Low rates anesthetize risk. When rates rise, discipline is rediscovered overnight. The policy language stays calm. Household cash flow does not. Private property completes the picture. Condos are sold as lifestyle upgrades, but function as yield vehicles. Rent tracks market demand. Prices track capital flows. Local buyers compete not only with neighbours, but with spreadsheets from abroad. The market does not care where money is from. It only cares that it arrived. Here's the part people avoid saying out loud. A system that relies on perpetual price growth requires perpetual new buyers with higher purchasing power. When wages lag, the system does not collapse immediately. It stretches. People buy later, smaller, further out, or not at all. The city still looks rich. The stress just moves indoors. And yes, on paper, households look asset-rich. Property values rise, net worth inflates, but liquidity stays thin. You cannot eat unrealized gains. You cannot pay school fees with theoretical appreciation. Asset wealth without cash flow is just pressure wearing a suit. This is why conversations about affordability feel disconnected. Policymakers talk in averages. Markets talk in returns. Households live in monthly statements, different languages, same city. Housing here succeeds brilliantly as a store of value. It struggles as a place to live without financial anxiety. Both statements can be true. Only one makes for good slogans. If you're here for surface-level optimism, this channel is not therapy. If you're here to understand property cycles, mortgage leverage, and why housing quietly reorganizes society around debt, hit like. If you want the next chapter on wages, labor bargaining power, and why incomes refuse to catch up no matter how productive the economy looks, subscribe. Chapter 3 will connect housing to salaries and explain why even good jobs feel insufficient now. Let's talk about wages, the part of the story that always shows up last, usually as a footnote, like an apology written by an intern. In Singapore, you're told the labour market is competitive, meritocratic, and globally integrated. Translation: you should feel lucky. Reality: you are productive, efficient, and permanently a few steps behind prices. On paper, salaries rise. This is technically true, like saying a treadmill moves forward. The problem is what salaries are racing against. Housing appreciates faster. Healthcare inflates faster. Education costs compound faster. Insurance premiums quietly metastasize. Wage growth shows up holding a water bottle, asking what lap this is. The structural issue is not laziness or skills, it's bargaining power. Singapore optimizes for capital mobility. Money must move freely, firms must stay competitive, labour therefore must stay flexible. Flexible sounds empowering until you realise it mostly means replaceable. Global talent pipelines keep pressure on wages at the mid and upper tiers. Regional labour arbitrage compresses the rest. Everyone is excellent. Everyone is also competing with an Excel sheet. Productivity gains do not automatically flow to workers. They flow to margins first. Shareholders get efficiency. Firms get resilience. Workers get performance reviews. When growth is channeled through capital markets, wages become a cost to be managed, not a reward to be celebrated. Then there's the psychological trick. Gross income looks impressive. Net income quietly disagrees. Mandatory savings are prudent, responsible, and long-term focused. They are also not cash. Your future self may be grateful. Your present self still has rent due. When daily life is expensive, delayed gratification starts feeling like enforced optimism. Middle-class professionals feel this most sharply. Too successful for subsidies, not asset-rich enough to coast. Promotions add responsibility faster than disposable income. Dual-income households become the default, not the exception. Time becomes the new luxury good. And let's not ignore the cultural layer. Complaining about wages is unseemly. Stability is prized. Risk is managed, not embraced. The result is a workforce that adapts quietly. You optimize spending. You delay upgrades. You tell yourself it's temporary. The system loves this attitude. Here's the uncomfortable equation. When asset inflation outpaces wage growth, work alone stops being the path to comfort. Ownership becomes destiny. Those who entered the asset game early smile politely. Those who didn't are told to be patient. This is not failure, it's design. An economy can be extremely efficient and emotionally exhausting at the same time. It can produce world-class outcomes while making ordinary life feel like an endurance test. If this chapter hit uncomfortably close to your payslip, hit like. If you want the next chapter that follows capital itself and shows how global money flows reshape local life, subscribe. Chapter 4 will trace investment capital, stocks, and financial markets and explain why they thrive even when households feel stretched thin. Say okay when you're ready to continue. Now we follow the money, because the money always knows where it's going. In Singapore, capital lives its best life. It arrives clean, stays liquid, multiplies politely, and leaves whenever it feels emotionally unfulfilled. People, meanwhile, are told to be resilient. This is not an accident. This is the business model. Singapore sells certainty to capital. Rule of law, tax efficiency, currency stability, regulatory predictability, zero drama. For global investors, this place is not a country. It's a financial operating system. Money doesn't move here because it loves culture. It moves here because spreadsheets feel safe. Look at the stock market. Equities perform. Dividends flow. Asset managers smile in understated fonts. This is celebrated as national success, and to be fair, it is. The problem is what stock market strength actually represents. It reflects corporate profitability, capital efficiency, and global demand. It does not reflect household breathing room. When markets rise, headlines cheer. When households struggle, silence. Because markets are visible, strain is private, private banking completes the ecosystem. Wealth doesn't just park here, it compounds here. Family offices, funds, holding companies. The city becomes a gravity well for global money. Prices respond accordingly. Property appreciates. Services upscale. Costs recalibrate upward. Locals are told this is vibrancy. Here's the uncomfortable part: no brochure prints. Capital inflows do not ask whether residents can keep up. They only ask whether returns are attractive. If rents rise, that's yield. If housing prices climb, that's momentum. If wages lag, that's flexibility. From capital's point of view, everything is working. The labour market adjusts to serve this reality. Jobs tied to finance, law, and regional HQs do well. Everything else competes for what's left. The city becomes stratified by proximity to capital. Not effort, not contribution, proximity. And yes, policymakers try to balance it. Cooling measures, targeted support, gentle nudges. But once you build an economy optimized for capital velocity, asking it to slow down for household comfort is like asking a sports car to admire the scenery. The result is a city that feels wealthy but expensive, efficient but exhausting, successful but tight. Capital is agile. People are anchored. One can exit instantly. The other needs a visa, a job, and a miracle. This is why the disconnect keeps widening. Markets thrive because they are designed to. Households strain because they are expected to adapt quietly. Stability for capital often means pressure for labour. That trade-off is rarely advertised, but it is always enforced. If you want finance explained without the investor brochure tone, hit like. If you want the final chapter that ties housing, wages, and capital together and answers the question everyone avoids, who actually wins this system? Subscribe. Chapter 5 is the conclusion. It will not be soothing. Time to end the polite dance. In Singapore, the system works exactly as designed. That's the uncomfortable part. There is no villain twirling a moustache. There is a set of incentives that reward capital speed, asset ownership, and policy credibility. Those incentives produce winners. They also produce pressure. Both outcomes are features, not bugs. Who wins? Asset holders, early buyers, capital intermediaries, firms whose margins scale globally, anyone whose income grows with prices rather than chasing them. If you own property that appreciated, equities that compound, or businesses that skim growth off the top, the city feels efficient, safe, and rewarding. The brochures are accurate for you. Who pays? Late entrants, renters, young households, middle-income professionals whose careers look impressive, but whose cash flow feels tight. People whose value is measured monthly, while assets are measured annually. They pay through longer mortgages, delayed milestones, smaller spaces, and a constant need to optimize life like a spreadsheet. The great trick is framing this as personal responsibility. Budget better, upskill, be patient, all good advice. None of it changes the math when asset inflation outruns wages. Work becomes necessary but insufficient. Ownership becomes the real divider. The city doesn't say this out loud because it sounds impolite. The numbers say it anyway. Policy tries to soften edges without touching the engine. Subsidies help at the margins. Cooling measures tap the brakes briefly. None of it reverses a model built to attract and protect capital first. When global money flows in, prices rise. When prices rise, locals adapt. When locals adapt quietly, the model is validated. This is why the global image and lived reality keep drifting apart. Internationally, Singapore is stability. Domestically, it's endurance. Both can coexist. They already do. So can Singaporeans afford Singapore? Some can, very comfortably. Many can, technically. Increasingly, a growing number can only do so by trading time, space, and peace of mind. Affordability hasn't vanished. It has been redefined downward. None of this means collapse is imminent. It means tension is permanent. A city optimized for capital will always feel expensive to the people who make it run. The question is not whether the model works. It clearly does. The question is how much quiet strain a society is willing to normalize while celebrating success. If this series helped you see past the slogans and into the balance sheet, hit like. If you want more straight talk on property, stocks, capital flows, and the financial mechanics that shape daily life, subscribe. This channel exists to say the parts most reports politely skip. Prosperity is real, so is the bill.